there are even today almost no female-led affordable shops.
Really?
And so I really wanted to see that change. Am I close to transit? Am I close to schools? Am I close to doctors and hospitals? And all of these things
that I need.
That we know that our residents are going to need.
Try to, I guess, walk me through the affordable capitalizations for the listeners, and then I'm just gonna try to ask as many questions as possible.
Sure. So,
Sydne, such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the founder of MRK Partners, up over 6,000 units. You've built, rehab, bought, things like that, which is, I mean, a huge feat. And I guess I'm just curious, like, did you just grow up saying, I'm gonna be in real estate? Or how did that like come about?
Yeah, so I grew up with a dad in the business, and actually my mom was a construction lawyer. So I was surrounded by lots of real estate development. And I think I always thought I would be in the business in one way or another. But honestly, I really, from a young age, just wanted to do something creative and, you know, something that would create change and create impact. And that really was kind of my desire. So I grew up driving a lot of real estate when I was young, and that taught me a lot about location. And that's really where I got my start.
And I feel like it's funny, real estate just opens itself up to, like, if you want to do something very finance heavy, creative, social, something social, like it can check so many boxes, right? When someone tells me they do real estate, I'm like, well, what in real estate? There's a million things in there, you know? Yeah. So then did you end up like studying real estate in college?
So yes, I was a general business major in college, but I studied a lot of different things, right? I studied psychology and sociology, and logistics I really liked. So I think, I wasn't the best college student. That's okay though. I
was a BC student.
I was just getting by really. But I really did know, I think to your point about real estate, there are so many different facets of real estate. And something that I talk a lot about now is finding something that with younger folk is you need to find something that you love and that you're good at. Because when you find that intersection, it won't feel like work.
Correct.
So that's really what I spent my time trying to find. And I was really lucky that I had parents in the industry. So I had a wide variety of people that I could talk to. So not only did I intern in a wide variety of asset classes and a bunch of different, facets of real estate, but then I would talk to a bunch of people. Hey, what do you like about this? What don't you like about this? And I just tried to continue to narrow down my search for kind of meeting that box.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I did the exact same thing. I started on the principal side and I ended up on the brokeraging side just through talking to folks. And I'm like, I think I will naturally like this more, at least in this stage of my career. And it's been, to your point, this intersection of something I enjoy a lot and also love to do. And it's just whatever I'm doing, I'm having fun doing. So I'm just going to keep doing it.
Totally.
And you work harder too.
Totally. And if you're not having fun and you're not enjoying the people you're doing with all of those things, then what are we doing? I mean,
exactly right.
I have 3 kids and, not every day, but some days they ask me, well, why do you go to work? And I'm like, well, why do you go to school? But but the bottom line is, if I didn't love what I do and feel like I was creating positive impact, then I wouldn't go because the trade-off is real. There's always a trade-off for something.
Yeah, 100%. So then when you graduate college, where do you land from a real estate standpoint?
So I landed in a mortgage brokerage shop. And I wanted to do that because I really felt that
in
underwriting.
New York or where?
I was in Maryland at DC. Okay. And that underwriting base is really important. No matter where in real estate you go, if you don't understand profit and loss, a balance sheet, all of those things. I actually did well in accounting, thank goodness. But the professor at my college was my dad's accounting TA. Okay. So if I didn't do well, he would report back. But that gave me a really good base, and then I was valuing a bunch of different assets. So shopping centers, condos, multi, all sorts of things. And so I got an understanding of all of those, and I got to feel and touch all the assets, put together marketing books, put those out to lenders. And that was, I did that for about a year before kind of the financial crisis.
Yeah.
So it was super interesting when there were 100 people that I would talk to, and then all of a sudden, all of those people were no more.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So.
I mean, it also gives you like a crash course to like kind of what can happen in real estate cycles, especially if you get like caught flat-footed.
Totally. And then, you know, okay, well, we still have these deals and now we're like kind of working them out, right? Like, so how do we help work them out when they're hairy? And it was actually probably one of the best lessons because we just had to sit there and try a million different things. You know, the best times to do well are when there's down cycles because you really got to figure it out. You really test your knowledge. And so there was a really smart kind of equity structure guy and I ran scenarios, you know, and we just tried to think of different ways to get creative. And so that was really helpful for me to see that, you know, even if you run into a wall, just keep going and, you know, you'll fall forward and continue to make progress.
Yeah, I feel like real estate, it's one of those, I mean, it's not forgiving in the sense that people take leverage and things like that, but if you can if you have staying power, typically you'll get bailed out, you know, sooner or later. I mean, it's the reason even South Florida, right? I have a bunch of clients that they're like, I want to sell, but I don't need to sell. And I'm very bullish in South Florida. And I'm like, I am too, you know, like, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
So then you were a mortgage broker working with a mortgage banking shop for how long?
For about 2 years.
Okay.
And then dabbled in some retail assets actually. And noticed, I love the concept of family business. I love my dad to pieces. But I think that what I did realize was that age and knowledge differential between, you know, me being a 23, 24-year-old kid and him being a very successful entrepreneur and me trying to learn from him with that big of a knowledge gap, honestly, was very difficult. And totally fair. So I'm a big proponent of, if you want to be in a family business, like, go out and find your own skill set. Go find something to work in, learn something. And that also gives you that confidence where you can go back and be like, I know this. And, you know, I think there's less issue in family business because you're not always just trying to prove yourself to the patriarch.
From like the get-go.
Exactly. If you have a skill set and know everything. And so I actually followed my then boyfriend, now husband, to California.
Nice.
And as an East Coast developer, my dad didn't really know anyone on the West Coast. And so he was like, you know, you got to figure it out. So I applied for a job on Craigslist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's how old I am. And I interviewed with 2 young guys and they were like, well, we really, you know, like, we don't really know what we're going to do, but maybe we'll do some affordable. And I was like, okay, well, I'm young, you know, and you two seem pretty smart and let's try it. And so...
It is affordable development?
Yeah, it was an affordable development shop. And we ended up doing like thousands of units that first year. I was their first employee.
Oh, wow.
And we did like thousands of units. And I basically just sat in an office and, you know, stuffed myself with chocolate to stay awake. And we just did all sorts of crazy, really creative stuff. And I loved it.
Yeah.
And I loved it for a couple reasons. Number one is I got to do all of the things.
Yeah.
So in affordable, there's a lot of government oversight. So there's applications upon applications and forms and all of these things. So filling all of that out, working with debt and equity providers, working through partnership agreements, working on asset management, working on accounting. And so it gave me such a breadth of experience in not just multi, but in affordable multi. And then also it was very complicated. So it was like a puzzle. Affordable housing is crazy.
I want to get into it.
In terms of puzzle, but it's so fun for me because I love that. And then also mission. I loved what we were doing. I really resonate with like residents themselves and wanting to see them do all of the things they want to do. And so put all that together and I had finally found, fortunately at a pretty young age, something that I loved and something that I was good at.
Yeah, it's incredible. So it's funny, I know obviously on the market rate stuff, right? It's, you know, you've got $100 million deal that you need to capitalize. let's say 60% of that is a loan, you've got $60 million and then $40 million of equity. And then the general partner typically puts in 10% of that, call it 4 million, and they go raise the other 36, and like the building gets off the ground if the number makes sense.
Yeah.
When I speak to affordable developers like yourself, it is a completely different ballgame in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
So try to, I guess, walk me through the affordable capitalizations for the listeners, and then I'm just going to try to ask as many questions as possible.
Sure. So, okay, let's use your same $100 million example.
Yeah.
So in affordable housing is essentially keeping rents at a reduced rate, right? Mm-hmm. Like that is the goal, is keeping rents at an average, at least in, let's use 4%, right? Mm-hmm. 4% low income housing tax credit in that world, keeping rents at an average of 60% of area median income. Mm-hmm. So basically HUD finds the limits every year, and they go and they do it like a census. Yeah. And you can get what is 100% of the area median income, but 60% of that, right? 100 is average. 60% of that will be 60% of the average.
Yeah. And so if the area median income's 100,000, you're looking to build homes for people that qualify for $60,000 incomes or lower.
Correct.
Right.
And the metric is basically that they pay 30% of their income to rent, right? Like if I remember my dad, when I first got an apartment, he's like, don't pay more than 30%. And I'm like, Dad, well then I'm not living anywhere because
then I'm homeless.
Yeah, because my first job paid me nothing. Yeah. But that's really the metric. Mm-hmm. And so if you assume that's what we're shooting for. Yeah. How do we subsidize developers so that they can create that? And there's two ways of doing that. Yeah. The first is less aggressive, and that's the tax-exempt bond program. Okay. So essentially, the Fed allocates tax-exempt bonds, and those go down to the states, okay? And so the benefit of a tax-exempt bond is typically the interest rate is lower because the interest that people are getting are tax-exempt. That's not always the case. Sometimes the yield curve's a little inverted, but that is one benefit. So on average, if you're seeing a 50 to 100 basis point differential in debt rates, that's material, right? For a deal. That'll help you get higher up the cap stack. So that is a benefit on the tax-exempt bond front. Then you have...
But you have to compete for these bonds.
So
right?
It depends. It depends on where you are in the world. So historically, prior to COVID, you have to apply for them, but most states had what was called volume cap. And they had volume cap that was rolling because they hadn't used all the volume cap from the prior year. So they would just keep rolling volume cap, and they would have plenty of volume cap to give out. Fast forward to COVID, interest rates go to zero. What didn't work for many years, because not all deals pencil at 5% or whatever, but all of a sudden during COVID, you have basically 0% interest rates. Construction costs had started to go up, but not as much as they,
have today.
Right. Yeah. And so you had this influx of deals that worked. And so volume cap went to zero. So all of the back volume cap that the agencies were building up went away.
Because everyone was sort of using them and taking those proceeds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So while it is competitive in the sense that it was really an administrative process before, it has become truly more competitive because of all the allocations that were given during the COVID years.
Oh, so basically like this cash reserve, let's call it, it's now getting it's getting completely wiped out every year. So now people are competing for those dollars.
Exactly.
And before they weren't as much.
Or if they were competing, there was still a wealth of dollars from prior years to be able to allocate. Yeah. So it wasn't really competitive. It was like, okay, you meet the requirements that is in this application, you will receive bonds.
Right.
So that's really where we are now, is in many states, it is more of a competitive process where you do have to score and you have to be able to get allocation. And that has been really hard because there are a lot of deals that need allocation, because in the 4% low income housing tax credit program, and we'll talk about 4 and 9, but in that program, as long as you get an allocation of tax-exempt bonds, you are guaranteed an allocation of low income housing tax credits.
Okay.
So now
there are two different things.
They're completely different things.
Bonds and low-income housing tax credits.
So let's go back to our two benefits that are given for these keeping rents low. The first one was the tax-exempt bonds. So now on the credits, and going to your $100 million example, our debt sizing is probably around like 40% of the total capital stack. Maybe a little bit higher, maybe up to 45, but anywhere between like 35 to 55%, depending on what you're doing, is usually debt. On the debt side. Okay. So the second,
so it's a less levered than
it's a little less levered, deals. But remember, you have a lot of extra costs that you don't have in typical market rate deals, like millions of dollars of cost, probably $15,000 a door almost, an extra cost. And also you have a big developer fee, because the way that these deals work is you generate basis, and having a big developer fee allows you to generate more basis, which you use as a source too. So let's pause on the developer fee for a second. So let's go to tax credits. So with the bonds, you get an allocation of low-income housing tax credits. So one tax credit is a $1 offset to your federal tax bill. Okay, so if you have to pay $1 in taxes and I give you one tax credit, you will then pay $0 in taxes. So we get these allocations of tax credits, and they are based on a calculation that is done, and it pretty much is, if you're talking about a new construction deal, what it costs to build your deal, not including land. That's pretty much how you calculate basis. A bunch of weird nuances. And so when we have, let's use 40% of our cap stack in debt, we probably get another 40 to 45% back via the sale of these tax credits. And so we take the credits and we go to large either syndicators who work directly with banks or have big multi-funds, or individual investors like banks themselves, and they are the ones investing. They're buying the credits. And they're buying the credits for a couple reasons. Number one is they have a CRA need. So many banks have Community Reinvestment Act needs, and buying the credits gives them credit for CRA. And so their return profile for meeting CRA is already very low. So it's beneficial to have them buy something where there actually is a positive return profile. And then otherwise you can invest in or their buyers are multi-funds, which are lots of smaller to medium-sized banks, sometimes large corporations like the Verizons of the world, et cetera, that have a need for losses. Because when you sell someone these credits, they get to own 99% of the deal, and they get to own
the tax credits
of the actual real estate. And the reason is because they get all of the benefit of the tax credit. So like, let's say we sell them the tax credits at 85 cents, right? So they get all of that 15-cent benefit over time. And then they also get the depreciation of the project.
Oh, really?
Because they're not investing for positive capital return, they're investing for loss. So between the discounted rate that they're buying for the credits, as well as the depreciation, they're still getting to their same return profiles, maybe less than a market rate savings. But they're getting it via savings of taxes. Got
it. So basically, you get a tax credit of, let's say, $100 million, which is big, but you get a tax credit for $100 million, and then that will offset someone's $100 million like tax liability. They have to pay that. So it's like, okay, if I have that $100 million tax credit, I don't have to pay $100 million in taxes, so I save $100 million, right?
Correct.
And then they will go and buy your $100 million tax credit at 85 cents on the dollar, give or take, you know? So then it's like, great, I can buy $100 million worth of tax savings for $85 million.
Correct.
And then on top of that, I'm getting the depreciation from the project where those tax credits are coming from over time.
Correct. And
so I'm saving $100 million in tax credits plus depreciation off other. So if I'm a big corporation that has all these tax liability payments, tax payments that I have to pay, taxes I have to pay, I can go and, you know, spend 85 million to get $125 million of savings sort of thing. And then you then go get, so now you're receiving my $85 million. I'm this corporation and I go, I'm going to give you 85 million. You're going to give me $100 million in tax credits. And then you basically say, I'm taking these 85 million and I'm going to go in and build this project with that 85 million.
Exactly. And because of the term of these deals, so on average, we're looking at least 15 years, right? Between the compliance period, the tax credit flow, everything. And so at the end of those 15 years, the return has met the necessary metrics such that we do not have to repay the equity. So,
walk me through that again. The return, walk me through that again.
So essentially, let's just go back to your example where you give me $85 million, okay? Yeah. So between the $100 million of offset that I give you in the credits, and then also all the depreciation that you get, your return is such that you don't need the equity back at the end of the deal to make your returns work.
Yeah, it's like, hey, whether your project, you know, is super successful or not, just in the savings of what I've bought, I've met my investment expectations.
Correct. I don't need my money back, and I need basically zero of your cash flow throughout the term.
Wow, because typically in like a market rate deal, like a non-affordable deal, it's like, hey, I'm giving you my money because I want a 30 or 25% return over 3 years or whatever it is. You know, exactly. So like I give you $1, I want you to give me back $2.5 or whatever.
Correct. And
for you, they're like, hey, you're giving me $1 and I'm already giving you all the savings you need over time.
Right. And so that's the other way that we are able to keep those rents reduced. Because if we had to pay return and we have to pay the investment back, the deals
you'd have to charge more in rent, and like that defeats the whole purpose.
So that's really the way the cap stack works. So back to our, whatever it was, $45 million of debt, we get another probably 40 to 45 million. So we're basically at 90.
The $45 million in debt, is that 85 million I'm giving you or no?
No. The 45 of tax exempt bond debt. So just typical leverage debt, right? And then for the tax credit equity on, a project of 100 million, it's probably another 40 to 45 million. So now we're at 85, 90 million dollars of the $100 million cost for the project. Yeah. And usually the rest of that is either deferment of fee, right? So on a $100 million project, your fee is probably somewhere in the $16 to $20 million range, but you're not going to get all of that. But we're using that to drive basically tax credit equity to drive that up. And so you'll defer the gap, which is the $10, $15 million. You'll defer that into the deal. So basically your benefit is anywhere from $5 to $10 million. And that is typical, right? Because if you look at a typical $100 million fee on a market rate deal, you're probably getting somewhere around 5%, maybe a little bit more.
Got it.
So that's how the cap stack works.
And then what's the 4% versus the 9%?
Yeah. So the 4% versus 9%. So with the 4%, if you get a tax exempt bond allocation, you automatically get 4%. And the calculation is basically 40%. So when you have a credit, you're basically getting 40 cents back on the dollar in equity.
Got it.
Now, there's a little bit of nuance to that with boosts and all this other stuff, but that is the point. The 9%, obviously, you're getting close to 70 cents and change.
On the dollar.
More.
So if you get $10 million in tax credits, it'll translate to about 4%, like $4 million.
Exactly.
On the 4% or 7.
It's about that. It's a little bit more on 4% and 9% depending on if you're in basis boosts. Again, we don't do too many 9s, but
why?
So 9s usually are a little bit of a different animal. So think about the cap stack on a 9%. It's, let's say, 10 to 30% debt. Yeah. And majority is that equity piece that's no returns and that you don't pay back. And the reason for that is that most 9% deals have lower set-asides, which means that the rents are even lower. Okay. So, for example, you would use it for permanent supportive housing or other specific target demos that need those lower rents, or agreements that you've made like for, project-based or disability housing or anything like that. And thus far, we have really played just in the general, like average 60%. We really haven't done too much targeting in terms of demos, although we're looking at that a lot more this year, just because that's not our specialty. A lot of nonprofits obviously specialize in that. And then there's, as everywhere, like a little bit of gaming of the system. It's very competitive for 9%. And so you'll want to play where you have a higher likelihood of winning. Totally. Pretty much. Yeah. Well, that's my whole thing with affordable. I feel like, right now we're in a cycle where a lot of developers can't get their deals off the ground. It's like in the market rate world, which is the one I can speak to. Maybe some condos in South Florida and things like ultra luxury, but for the most part, people are stuck with land because the numbers don't pencil. But I feel like affordable, these municipalities or states, like they have this annual sort of like refresh of money that they need to put out, and it allows affordable developers to sort of always be in season as it relates to being able to get projects off the ground. Is that right? Or yeah, I mean, the math still has to work, right? Because it's still a sources and uses thing. But what we're seeing right now, and we've actually partnered with a lot of market rate developers right now that can't get their deals off the ground, because the argument is, look, like just leaving the value of the land, you were going nowhere with it anyways, and we'll get your deal out of the ground, and we'll get you your money back over time, or at least get you some return on that money, and that helps close the gap. So that's why it's working. Like we're doing a couple deals in California like that, and to your point, there is availability in terms of bonds and credits, but because the land is so expensive, if we as an affordable developer had to go in and pay $60, $70, $80, $100,000 a door in land, the deal would not pencil. Right. But if we have like a group that would be willing to roll in the land, it's like, hey, I paid or whatever, at least a portion of the land, right? Then we can close that gap even with higher interest rates. Got it. So you're doing that in California. So for me, I mean, I have a bunch of market rate developers that have land that they're stuck with, and the only way they're thinking about it is like, Omar, can you sell it for more than I bought it for? And I'm like, not really, not in this market. Or can we just need to sit on it? So you have a sort of another strategy, which is like, hey, if you roll in sort of the land at your basis or close to it, we can probably get it off the ground and get it moving. Totally. Versus you sitting on your hands having carry costs for 2 years or whatever it is. And for South Florida, where we've seen like such a gentrification, it's actually the right answer, because we've lost so much of that affordable housing that to be able to put it back, it is so important for the community. And so it makes a lot of sense. And that's why you see municipalities like really excited to support those affordable types housing, of workforce housing, affordable housing, the whole thing. The mayor's agenda, many of the commissioners, because it's really they win on those types of opinions. Totally, because we have wait lists. I mean, upon wait lists in South Florida for people to be in the housing. Yeah, so basically you were working at a mortgage banking shop for 2 years, then you go work sort of retail asset management for how long, more or less? Like a year and a half, something. And then from there you say, I'm going to go start and MRK Partners and build and develop? Is that kind of the transition, or did you go somewhere else? No, I worked at that became large affordable housing developer in California. That's right. How long were you there for? I was there for 5 years. Oh, okay. So that's kind of where you really cut your teeth with affordable in California. And I learned a ton. And the other thing, I am like very girl power. I have 3 girls, and oh, really? I do. Phenomenal. Yeah, they're crazy. Are you done at 3? Oh my gosh, yes. You're like, I'm so done. My husband would love to have another one, but I am just told him until you can bear a child, we're not having unless it's your turn, we're good here. Right, exactly. I'm just too tired. That's amazing. When did you have your first? I just got a curiosity. So when I went to start MRK, I thought, oh, I'll just do a deal a year, right? And I'll relax. I'll make good money. I'll nap, right? I already know that's not how the story plays out, but let's go. Let's hear it. I'm not good at relaxing. It's just like not in me. Yeah, same. So I hadn't had time really to like figure out my wedding. We had been engaged, but And so we got married. I got pregnant a month later, and we did like 4 deals the first year. And then I had a baby, and I was like, oh shit. I should probably hire some people because we had like 4 or 5 more deals in the pipeline.
Right. Yeah, they can pay for help, you know.
Right, exactly. So like I had a nanny, and she was like, she would at the office was above the garage in the beginning because so she would bring like the baby, and I would nurse the baby, talk on the phone. Like everyone in the office was just listening, right, to me do this. And so I put up these like partitions in this little office above the garage so that people couldn't see me nursing the kid, but they could listen to what I was talking about on the calls. It was...
So then how old were you when you transitioned from the California affordable development shop where you really cut your teeth to like starting MRK?
I was, I think 30.
30 years old.
29 or 30, yeah.
And
30.
it was sort of like you just learned the business so well with those other guys that you're like, hey, I really like this. I want to do it sort of on my own.
Yeah, I felt that I've never been really good at... I want to do things that I want to do. That's always been my personality. And so I just wanted the opportunity to try. And I thought that there was no better time than then.
Yeah. What year was it?
2015.
Okay.
So there was really no better time than then. I didn't have any obligations. I could do it then. And also, again, with the girl power, like I'm big in female empowerment. So I really wanted to say, I had seen a lot of affordable housing shops, and there are even today almost no female-led affordable shops.
Really?
And so I really wanted to see that change. I figured, who knows? Like maybe this will work, maybe it won't. I have no idea. But let's try, and let's try to look at this a little bit differently than it's been looked at in the past. Because so my entire C-suite is women.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's all women. We all randomly have 3 children.
And they're all girls.
Oh, no.
No, I'm just kidding.
No. So
I'm like, that would have been super girl power.
One of them has just boys, and we are insisting that they marry our children, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. We like basically stagger their ages.
There's a succession plan for MRK.
Totally, right? It's already set up. But yeah, so we all... we have a ton of women in the company. I do a lot in terms of mentorship with women. Yeah. I really want to see more women in real estate. And so I just wanted to look at the company and kind of redefine how we were doing affordable housing, how we were operating in the space. We're not going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming and doing fishing trips like on these boondoggles. Like that's really not our shtick. Yeah. And how do we kind of get out of that and come up with a company that has a really awesome culture, but also has a little bit of a different set of values. And so that's what has happened here, fortunately, over 10 years at MRK is creating this. And when we look at housing, I have an incredible husband who is,
Is he in real estate?
No, he's not. But he does all of the things, right? He's super supportive at home and does all of the things. But as the mom, I still am the one, like I worry about what are my kids eating? Like how are we gonna get to the grocery store? Like how am I gonna fit this in? How are they getting to school? Is it blue fucking day? Or whatever it is, right? Like whatever it is at school. Like don't forget the cookies. So
your husband's like, I just want to make sure they're alive.
Right. No, and he's great at that,
and
right?
Tired.
And he does dishes and does all of the things, but like my role is still
there's a lot more.
Doing all of these things. And I'm fortunate enough to have help with that and someone that helps me do all of that. But it's still my job to make sure that all of that stuff is happening. 100%. And so when I look at housing, I'm like, okay, am I close to transit? Am I close to schools? Am I close to doctors and hospitals and all of these things
that I need,
that we know that our residents are going to need, whether they're kids or seniors, know? And so we just approach it a little bit differently.
Yeah. So 30 years old, you start MRK.
Yeah.
I'm curious sort of about the first deal that you guys got, sort of under contract and did. But I just, before you go there, so did you get married at 30 or 32? I'm just trying to get like when the kids started happening with the starting of a shop.
So I, much to my husband's, I guess he didn't love this, but I really didn't want to get married until we were going to have kids. I was like, what's the point? We live together. Like it's a thing, whatever, right? I think I waited so long that like all of my parents are just like, just don't get married. Just give us children. Like we want babies.
Skip the step. It's
right,
fine.
Exactly. We don't care. So so I started MRK in 2015 in January.
Okay.
I was married in, boy, if I mess up my anniversary, my husband will kill me. I was married in March, day, I think 29. Yeah. And then I had a baby in January.
Okay.
So I was pregnant.
January.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was basically pregnant in April.
Yeah.
And we reversed.
So 4 months into starting MRK, you're pregnant, pretty much.
Yeah, basically. We pretty much reversed like our wedding and bachelorette party. We had a very small wedding. So I had my bachelorette party in April, and I actually tested myself because I didn't feel good during my bachelorette party, and I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, good. That was probably, shouldn't have had so many cocktails the night before. But anyway, so like it just all happened super quickly.
Okay, so now you're pregnant, but talk to me about the first MRK deal and sort of how it comes together.
Yeah, so again,
You're in California still?
So in Cali. And I was sick because, it's terrible. It feels so horrible. But when you engage your brain and you get excited and you have adrenaline, like that's part of what makes the nausea go down, right?
Oh,
like that's actually a thing. So I was like, okay, like gotta stay busy, right? It's that or sleep, right? Those are the only two things that makes it better.
Easier to stay busy.
Right. So I am very fortunate again to have my dad, and he was like, I need an exchange deal for like this money that I'm exchanging out of this other deal. And I said, okay, let me look.
So he sells a deal and he wants to put it into another deal.
He's like, let me exchange. And I said, okay. And so the first deal that I did was a deal down here in South Florida.
Oh, love that.
That we exchanged into, and we set up this agreement. So I did all the work, I did all the asset management, like MRK did, but then we had an agreement that I would buy him out in the future when the deal was ready to be syndicated, i.e. putting tax exempt bonds and all that stuff.
So was it a development deal or?
No, it was an existing senior deal.
Okay.
And it was
like seniors living?
Yeah, not like assisted, just
55 plus?
55 plus.
Yeah.
And so we bought that.
Where was it in South Florida?
It was up north.
Okay.
It was in Deerfield.
Okay, Deerfield. Yeah.
And so we did that. We bought it, and then a couple years ago.
How big was it? 5 million, 30 million?
I think it was 14 million.
Okay.
Something right around there. I think that number's right.
Was it like a value add type of play, or just like, hey, it's a newish built deal and we need to kind of park money there?
So it had upside because they weren't taking advantage of the tax exemption.
Okay.
So there's a senior tax exemption for affordable housing. And so basically he 1031 into the deal. Then we got the exemption and paid attention to what was happening at the deal, and so it cash flowed.
Yeah.
And then again, the agreement was always we would buy him out. So we did that, and we effectuated that probably 5 years ago.
Okay.
And so then we bought him out, and it became a tax credit deal for us. So that was really my first deal, and technically he made it possible. But that was.
And then so that was in South Florida.
Yeah.
And then do you just have like a national purview, or you're like, hey, I really like these 1 or 2 markets? How do you kind of think about that? Like, I guess like what was the strategy of MRK after that? First deal.
So the strategy is like very knowledgeable about location. And so for me, it was SoCal, where I was based, NorCal, where I could easily get to, and I understood the market. Then it was DC Metro, where I had grown up, because again, really knew that market.
For sure.
And then it was down here because my dad was down here.
Got it.
And he taught me about location. So I trusted him to go and look at stuff, or be here in case there was an issue down here.
Yeah.
And so it was South Florida. So that's really how we expanded presence. We've gone to a couple other locations since then, but we either have local partners there or have really gotten up to speed on the market. Got it.
And then right now, when you've got this, call it 6,000 unit portfolio, where is it sort of allocated more or less,
It's pretty much half and half between West Coast and East Coast, with probably about 2,500 to 3,000 units in South Florida.
Got it. Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay,
we have
amazing.
a really good presence here. And then when I moved here in 21, that was really, we opened an office in Boca. So we have an office in Boca and LA because we were continuing to grow out this office here, and because we continue to have a larger presence here.
That's phenomenal. So with the tax credit stuff, affordable development, what I have sort of noticed, and I'm curious if this is like true, is that when an affordable developer is like applying for tax credits or for a deal, it's a public application. So then other developers can see the application you posted and can see the land that you're trying to buy and build, and also how you're trying to build it, because it's a public application. So your biggest competitor can then go see your submission and not only sort of steal it if you don't get your money, and then next year they can go and like try to do it but better, but also poke holes into your submission. Like, it's pretty cutthroat in that sense. Is that all true?
So yes, I would say that, like, where you see the poke holes, that's like the 9%. That's very competitive.
You see, okay, you're like, I'm good, guys.
That's the 9% where it's very competitive. That is really a Florida thing. I don't see that kind of stuff in other states. Yeah, no.
Have to be Florida people.
It's crazy. So everyone's like, hey, you did that wrong. You shouldn't get your points. I should get your allocation.
And they'll go and like, snitch, pretty much.
It's crazy.
No way.
We don't
what is
have
something that maybe not to a project you did, but what's something that someone got wrong? Is it just like, the setbacks, or like kind of
so your goal with the 9%, because it is a finite number of credits, is to get allocation. And so if anyone has a better score than you, you want to bump them off, right? So that you go up in the line. So it doesn't matter. It could be you didn't submit that letter that you had to submit. It could be your setbacks are wrong, so your project won't work. It could be you filled this out the wrong way.
Like even petty stuff.
It's crazy.
That's insane.
So again, you don't play in that space. I'm not all about that. I don't really understand that. I don't know that that's fair. I think it makes it very difficult for like smaller shops who don't have 8
all
million
the resources
people reviewing these
I've seen these
applications.
submissions. They're massive.
Totally. Now in the 4%, everything is public and you everything's shared, but it's not like that, right? Because the 4% isn't competitive. The bonds are competitive. And most of the time they're really not competitive because there usually is allocation, again, with a
and
few
does that
exceptions.
allocation change from municipality to municipality? Like, are you basically in a position where you say, we really like and want to do more deals in Deerfield than in Pompano Beach because we know them and we have a better relationship there? Like, give me some of the competitive advantages and edges.
It's county based. So the way that the bonds get allocated is by population. So they get allocated down to the states, and then the states allocate them. They either keep the allocation or they allocate them to either housing authorities, right, or other larger entities within the state. So essentially, that's the play. So in California, sometimes the housing authorities, like county-based, have allocation. Sometimes you're going to a larger issuer that is state-based but has allocation. In Florida, it is mainly county-based.
Okay.
So each county has allocation, and then Florida Housing also has allocation.
And it's a different allocation for the 9% and the 4%, or is it sort of the same?
So again, credits are not allocation because they're automatic and they're as of right. For the 9%, you can only get credits from Florida Housing.
Got it.
Because credits just come from Florida Housing.
Right.
But the bond allocations are state-based, are county-based.
Got it. So now another question I had about the investors, if you will. So me as a corporation that's buying these tax credits, just tax credits and the depreciation sort of makes me whole and gives me my investment. But then do you also have like limited partners that do want a 15%, 25% return on your deals, or?
So there is, like, for the IRS, there are some specific requirements whereby, like, if you have paid off your full developer fee out of cash flow over time, then they get 10%. But the max that they'll ever get of cash flow is 10%.
Got it.
So, and that's really to meet requirements. It's less about return.
Got it. So, and then to make deals pencil, is it the same like in, I would say my world with market rate? It's like you want them to be at or close to a 7% yield on cost, give or take? Like, how does that look like in your world?
Yeah, we don't look at any of those things really. the only caveat to that would be if you are paying like more for your land than you can afford, then sometimes there is a hole. Like let's say you can't defer enough developer fee and there's a hole in deals, which there are definitely sometimes, and more so these days with higher interest rates, higher construction costs, higher land values.
Yeah.
And so for that hole, if you're putting in your own capital, then you'll look at that as a return based or an IRR based.
Yeah.
Or if you're getting some investment from a third party, then you would look at that.
Right.
But otherwise, we are not IRR driven at all because there's no actually investment of capital.
Right.
That gets a return.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's a very different model.
And then have you only sort of done affordable type stuff within MRK? Is that like just the strategy, or? We're in the preservation space, so we've done actually a lot of market to affordable conversion. Okay.
So that's like a little bit of a niche that we've done.
Yeah.
We've done like some adaptive reuse hotel to affordable, but we have really stayed in that. Again, like 80% of area median income and below.
Yeah.
Looking at more workforce stuff this year, specifically in South Florida.
Is it still like in South Florida, when I'm talking to all my developers, they're all looking for like garden style sites, and then naturally they end up looking at mid-rise sites just because it's less land.
Yeah.
But they really don't want to touch like urban high-rise right now. Is it different in the affordable world where it's like we could do a high-rise, or more mid-rise is pencil for us, or it's still?
Yeah, it's a math question, and here I'll give you an interesting example. So we did the financing for Sawyer's.
Yeah.
Which is
Sawyer's Walk.
Yes.
Very cool.
So 950 parking spaces, 250,000 square feet of retail, 578 affordable units. The reason why...
Is this, by the way, the one that's got like the Ross and the Target?
Ross, Target, Aldi.
Yeah. And you're like on the I-95.
Yeah,
it's like
you can
right
see
next
it.
to it.
And
MSC bought...
MSC bought about
cruise,
70,000.
right? It's a cruise company?
What?
It's a cruise
company?
company?
MSC is a cruise company. And they made about 70,000 square feet, their North America headquarters.
Yeah.
So they basically took the rest of the retail after all those big boxes. There's some small pieces in there. But the reason why people like are looking for 3-story, right, walk-up stuff is because it's cheaper to build.
Correct.
Right? And so if you can't find stuff that's cheaper to build from a land perspective, you need other sources of income.
Right.
Right? Like there's only 2 things to do. Make it cost less or get more income, right?
Get more money.
Right. And so the beauty of combining like the retail with the affordable was that we were able to bring down the cost of the project and increase the debt amount on the...
Bring down the cost of the project because it's like cheaper to build retail? Or?
No, but bring down the overall... Like we could never have put 578 affordable units there in Overtown. It would not have worked. We needed other sources of income to be able to increase the debt and allow for the project to be complete.
To be feasible.
Yeah. So I love the idea of this like creative financing and putting together these different sources of capital. Like for example, there was a CDD did the garage, and then we did a huge taxes exempt bond loan, and we had, I want to say we had like 75 to 80 million dollars of tax credit equity, and then we had about 170 million.
So would you categorize these as like PPPs, public-private partnerships, or not really?
So it was a public-private partnership in that we have the garage with the CDD, but it was all like completely independently financed. But I will say that you need the partnership from the local municipality to help you get there.
Yeah.
And
in this case, it would be Overtown?
Yes. So Overtown and the CRA, and they were super helpful in making this whole thing work. And the county issued the bonds. I mean, it took a lot of people to do it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, these kind of mixed income, mixed use type developments, I think are the wave of the future if we want to preserve and or create affordable units in urban core.
Yeah, especially like density, and things like that. Yeah, very, very interesting. So for you guys, is it like, I'm trying to think, do you then basically say, hey, in South Florida, the people are very, when I say the people, it's like the cities and municipalities, we have wind at our back with them. Like they want to work with us. They want to build this type of developments versus maybe other counties, not to talk about like bad about other counties, but they're just like, hey, it's always like a struggle to try to do something here. So let me focus in maybe Miami-Dade or Broward or.
Totally. I mean, you get a lot of like NIMBYism in our space, and you get that with municipalities. I will say like the counties that we've worked with in Florida have been amazing, like nice. Super helpful, and they're with you, right?
Build.
Yeah, they're with you. They're not against you, right? Yeah. And that's really different than other counties.
Yeah.
So I would say that's why we also like want to continue to expand our South Florida presence, just because it's been. There's also such a need, but it's been really great.
Yeah, I'm gonna start sending you sites from like market rate developers that are like, I'm not touching my site for a while. Yeah. So like if you can come in and provide a solution, I mean, that'd be great. And for sure you're providing an option, which is one that they're not looking at it with that lens.
Totally.
Yeah. So we'll definitely talk about that. And then I kind of wanted to finish up the conversation talking about building MRK. So, did you always say, hey, I want it to be sort of C-suite women all around, and then also like sort of lessons learned in building a company,
Yeah, there are a lot of lessons learned. So I would say that we started a lot in the beginning without process, right? We were very entrepreneurial, very startup-like, and we were just like doing a billion things, and we were all like sitting in a room together looking at a computer screen and like trying to
figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, by the way, I'll work for these billion-dollar developers. It's pretty similar, but everyone's running around. Everyone's trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah, so we were doing a lot of that. Yeah. But I think that as you grow, right? So we're, I think 25 or something like that right now. There has to be a little bit more structure. Yeah. And so we've really worked the last couple of years to create that structure. Yeah. And as we have grown, the other thing that I think we focused on, so before we were just trying to get deals done to drive revenue, right? To be able to sustain the beast, right? Correct. And now we're saying, okay, not only are we building exceptional housing with, resident services and community resources, et cetera, but we're actually trying to integrate into communities in a better, more thoughtful way. Mm-hmm. So for example, we're working on a deal in Fort Lauderdale where we're going to move around the housing to one parcel to create like a real true community, since it's scattered site, and then working to redevelop the other parcels based on the need in the location. And so in that way, how can we contribute to the actual community? And like, it's like a give and take. What do you need, right? And what do we want to provide in terms of housing? Yeah. So we are focused on that. We're also focused on kind of thought leadership and how we can help other people. To me, like, I love to brainstorm how to make deals work, just because I just want to see more affordable housing built and create impact and change. And so how do we kind of get some of the knowledge that we have, kind of like this podcast, out into the world? Get it out. Exactly, so that people can either use us as a resource or use what we're producing as a resource, and trying to find other ways to help solve the overall housing crisis. Yeah. So I would say like, that's where we're going. And then we have a foundation. So that foundation focuses on scholarships and financial literacy. And so that foundation is rolled out through all of the MRK communities. And we started that probably 3 years ago.
What's the foundation called?
It's called Bloom.
Bloom.
Yeah. And so that's really cool. I mean, some of like the most fun I've ever had is calling someone being like, hey, you got a scholarship to the school. And it's like, it's super, super awesome. And then the other thing we're doing is we're launching this year our own internal resident services group. And, we just really want to find we want to help create best-in-class resident services, because we believe that it's not just enough to build, again, exceptional, quality, beautiful, affordable housing. We want the service wraparound to be able to help residents thrive in whatever way.
Build communities, like foster communities and things like that. Which, I mean, even in the market rate stuff, I see that a lot now, where they're like doing a lot of community events, resident events and stuff.
Yeah, because people, like, since COVID, feel alienated, right? And they miss that sense of community. And so how do we get people together for potlucks and arts and crafts or whatever your heart desires, just creating that community again.
Yeah. And you feel a sense of home, and you know the people in your building and stuff like that. And all you're doing is opening up sort of a platform for them to mingle. You know? Yeah. So I have to ask, you have now moved to South Florida for how long?
3 years.
How do you like it? Did you ever think you were going to be here?
I never thought I was going to be here. I grew up coming down here to see my grandparents, to be honest.
You're like, that's where people go to die.
Right. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm never living here, right? I was like, people drive way too slowly here for me. But I will say that since COVID, like South Florida is crazy. And Miami's a little different. Miami is super fun and was always like more fun. But up where I am.
You're in Boca, you said,
I'm in Boca. Yeah. You know, it has really also changed. And while I love Cali and I still go there a lot, I love the vibe. My kids are happy and we're close to, you know, family that's all on the East Coast. And, you know, we found kind of a home in Boca with people that we really like who are from all over. I
was going to say, have you felt like your community in Boca is people that are now from New York? And Boston.
Chicago, right? Boston, New York, Cali. Like it's such a mixing bowl, and everyone wanted to meet other people.
Right.
And so we were all like, you know, there to meet. And so it's created, honestly, friendships more quickly here than it took me 10 years to create in LA.
Like somewhere else.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. So a lot of the people that I now know in Miami, they work at like, one of the guys is a head of product at Coinbase. They work at Citadel. They work at Stripe. And I'm just like, you guys did not exist here 4 years ago. Right. Like all my friends were just sort of real estate, you know, finance guys. And now it's like, and to your point, they're all looking to like meet people and have a community and things like that. So it's like open up to like mingling and stuff like that, which is a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing, right? Yeah. That's the point.
That's amazing. So. And then my last question for you is advice for women in the industry.
Yeah.
You know, like we have, there's several women within Berkadia, and I'm always encouraging them to like go out and like speak more, go to more events. And like, I'm of the opinion that like, if you're a really like hardworking, smart, like well, sort of, you know, well, how do you say it? Like you present yourself really well as a woman, like you almost like stand out actually within social circles. Cause like everyone knows that like, you know, badass girl that like runs circles around everyone, you know, type of thing. So I'm curious. It's true. Yeah. And I'm like, you're great. You should be out way sooner than like the other guy, you know, like I want you to come to meetings with me.
Yeah.
So walk me now through, I guess, like advice that you would give for like younger women that want to be in commercial real estate, want to make a difference, want to be in the industry, but you know, are maybe intimidated by.
Yeah, I mean, I think that women are always a little bit more timid and a little less aggressive. It's just kind of the way that we're built. But I would say that have the confidence to do the things, right? And find a person, right? Like find someone like you who will take someone under their wing, right? Who you can trust and who will take you to meetings and who will introduce you to people who will help guide you. So find that. It doesn't even have to be a mentor, right? It can be an unofficial relationship. And I think I found people like that throughout my career. I would say, feel free to reach out to me, right? Like reach out to other women. Women want to help women in this space. And even if you just want to ask, hey, like, what do you do? So we can make sure that we find something that you really like, but just to have conversations, you know, like reach out to us. We want to help you. And like, we're there for you and you've got this. Like, no offense, we're kind of like the better sex. So.
You want to laugh? We've got two specific women at Berkadia that come to mind, and I'll name Shannon and Abigail.
Yeah.
They crush it.
Right?
They like run circles around most of the guys.
Right.
They're super organized. They're super responsive. They're like on point. Like, when I need help, I'm like, Shannon, please. Right. You know, like actually.
Totally. Yeah. Right. And that's like the confidence that I think we need. And we just need so many more women in this space.
Yeah.
And I will also say that like we have someone in our shop who started with us like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And she was in ops. She moved to construction and kind of like finance and investor relations. Yeah. She now leads our marketing and branding, and she is phenomenal. Oh, wow. She's technically in real estate, right? 100%. But she is like a rock star and has this weird niche position. So it doesn't have to be the normal track.
Yeah.
I think that's the other advice I would give. Like find culture that works for you. And that will also be like a huge starting point because you can go from there laterally, vertically, all kind of all over
you could
the
end
place.
up in financing or marketing or whatever within the shop, you know? That's amazing. All right, Sydney, I can't thank you enough for taking the time.
Thank you. So fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.